back to the show today. We are talking about cheating in the NBA. Is there a way to put your team over the edge through ethical gray areas? Or maybe even black and white areas that no one's paying attention to? I'm fascinated by scandals and conspiracies in sports. I think if your sport doesn't have a person or group trying to break the rules, or at least expose loopholes in the rules to their benefit, it probably means that the sport isn't important. Just as much as we need mendacious griffs trying to cheat their way to a championship, sports also need the tattletales to blow the whistle when they smell something fishy. So let's start with the most ubiquitous form of cheating in the NBA, tampering. Tampering is the driving over the speed limit of the NBA. You're not supposed to do it, but as long as you're not doing it any more than anyone else, you're probably gonna get away with it. Tampering can manifest itself in a few different ways. The first and most common is an agent communicating with a team before their player becomes a free agent. The league wants things to be fair. They want each team to have an equal opportunity to sign the players that they want. So the most recent incident of tampering was last offseason, with Drew Eubanks and the Phoenix Suns. Charania of The Athletic reported that the Phoenix Suns were signing Eubanks 5 minutes after free agency started. There's no way this negotiation took 5 minutes. Reading an entire contract would probably take more than 5 minutes. So the league was obviously very suspicious. I imagine the NBA gave the Suns an ultimatum. They probably said, hey, listen, we know you tampered. We can take a second-round pick from you, or we can do an investigation and punish you worse off if it's confirmatory, which it's gonna be confirmatory. The Suns probably just decided to take the L on the second-round pick. The same thing happened with the Milwaukee Bucks. When they tried to sign Bogdan Bogdanović in 2020, the Bucks and the Kings were working on a sign-and trade. They were working on it well before free agency too. Apparently, even Bogdan and Giannis were in communication with each other. Adrian Wojnarowski tweeted out the details of the trade immediately after free agency opened. The Bucks lost the second-round pick and they did end up signing Bogdan. Now, one thing I find very interesting about these two stories is that neither case would have been exposed if it weren't for Shams and Woj. These are two journalists who have made breaking news their calling card. They weren't trying to expose a crime, they were just trying to be the first to report legitimate business. And by nature of the timing, they exposed the illegal activity. So my question is, why would anyone inside of an organization leak information to these guys? The organization should just put out a press release when they're ready, so they don't raise any suspicion about when the deal was actually brokered. If I knew anyone in my organization was friends with either of these journalists, I would fire them immediately. These guys are total gossip. If you know why front offices leak these secrets, I'd really like to know. The other type of tampering is publicly expressing interest in a player as a coach or an executive. You can't go on ESPN as a coach and start talking about how bad you want Dante DiVincenzo on your team, talking about how good you'll treat him and all that. You'll get a fine. The Lakers got fined $50K because of Vice President Magic Johnson. He was glazing Giannis in a print interview. This wasn't even on TV. I'm not gonna quote the interview because it's not even that interesting. He just said that Giannis was talented, he could dribble, he is gonna be an MVP, and he's gonna put Milwaukee on the map. Just that type of stuff. Just nice stuff to say. But Commissioner Adam Silver was not having it. And here's what he had to say about it.
And the message to not just Magic, but all the executives in the league is stop talking about players on other teams.
And this totally makes sense to me. I get it. ESPN is going to want to have retired players come on their show and talk. But if they're currently employed by an NBA team and speaking publicly about a current player that is not on their team, they gotta keep it in their pants a little. Daryl Morey, the ultimate star of NBA executives, even got fined for a tweet. While he was the VP of basketball operations for the Sixers, he sent out a tweet congratulating James Harden for the 1-year anniversary of him breaking the Houston Rockets' all-time assist, which he swears was an automated tweet that he queued up when he was actually working for the Rockets. But either way, scheduling a congratulatory tweet that far in advance for something so esoteric is such a bootlicking move that he deserves to lose $50,000. That's pathetic, dude. These guys aren't the only ones. Doc Rivers was fined $50K for saying nice things about Kawhi. Pat Riley said he'd leave a key under the doormat for LeBron in 2021. He got fined $25K. If you work as an executive in the NBA, the best thing for you to do is not do interviews. Anything that you could say to ingratiate yourself to a player is gonna get you a fine. And any juicy inside information that you might spill is gonna get you fired. Remember that, all you NBA executives. Now, another way NBA players can cheat is through performance-enhancing drugs. Now, while this is more common in other sports that rely on more power and stamina, it does from time to time happen in the NBA. For instance, DeAndre Ayton was suspended for 25 games back in 2019. After the Suns' home opener, Ayton tested positive for a diuretic. A diuretic is just something that makes you need to pee. It's not a performance-enhancing drug itself, but it is banned because certain diuretics are used to hide performance-enhancing drugs. Ayton did appeal the suspension, saying that he had inadvertently taken the substance. I guess some smoothie shop in Phoenix was putting steroid cover-up in their blenders or something. I don't know, but whatever it was, the arbiters did not buy it. DeAndre Ayton served that entire 25-game suspension. It's funny, Wilson Chandler and John Collins also served 25 25-game suspensions for the same thing. And no one really cared about any of these cases. I had actually forgot that any of these guys were juicing. And I think this is a product of the fact that these guys are not winners in the league. If Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire weren't breaking home run records, no one would have cared what they were shooting up. And it's possible that no one would have even noticed. If the Astros hadn't won the World Series, would anyone have ran back tapes listening for someone banging on a trash can? I don't think they would have. So even if John Collins or DeAndre Ayton's performance had been enhanced, somebody would have probably called BS on them anyway. How did these guys get so good? So the next type of cheating I want to talk about is flopping and dirty plays. I grouped these two together because they feel like the counterpoint to each other. One being illegal physical contact done to not be seen by the ref. The other being pretending to be illegally contact so the ref does see it. So let's start with who by my research is the biggest flopper in NBA history. And it goes to Manu Ginobili, followed very closely by Vlade Divac. It's very interesting that both these players came from countries where soccer is the main sport. A sport where flopping is as much a part of the game as shin guards and physical affection. Manu is definitely the progenitor of your Patrick Beverleys and your Chris Pauls. Manu originated the instinctive flop. If Manu was even touched by another player, he would go nuts. Some of these flops were just way too performative. It didn't take long for refs to realize that this dude was being a total hand. It was like he was a henchman in an action movie. It was so bad that other NBA players knew it was coming, and they'd flop too, just to give Manu a taste of his own medicine. So who was the dirtiest player in NBA history? Well, no. We're gonna go with the player who got away with the most dirty plays. Remember, we're talking about cheating. That player is John Stockton. John Stockton is an all-time great point guard. He's in everyone's top 5. You're not gonna find anyone where he's not in the top 5. He's the all-time leader in steals, and he's the all-time leader in assists. And no one is catching him. But in recent years, with all these player podcasts, the truth is coming out that players hated playing against Stockton because he was nasty.
Chuckwagon, the fuse was lit for some post-game fireworks.
Obviously, the ref's not going to do their job. They're going to let him set, move, and pick that A. So I was trying to separate his shoulder or break a rib.
Against John Stockton. And I have the greatest respect for him. I see him away from the court, love him, great guy. But he was a dirty bastard.
In the same way that Manu would flop every time that he was touched, Stockton would retaliate harder than whatever you did to him. But you could always tell he was trying to do it off the ball so that he wouldn't get caught. Stockton wasn't a tall guy, he was 6'1", so he had to make up for it with aggression. So NBA players did not like the dude. But it seems as though now, 20 years later, players really respect him. So the last example of cheating in the NBA that I want to talk about is about a team that tried to circumvent the salary cap. We're talking about Joe Smith and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Back in the year 2000, Joe Smith was picked first overall in the 1995 NBA draft by the Golden State Warriors. Joe was a decent player, but he didn't really live up to the hype of being the #1 overall pick. So he ended up being a free agent in 1998. He signed a 1-year deal with the Minnesota Timberwolves worth $1.75 million. That is not a lot of money. For reference, he was offered an extension from the Golden State Warriors a couple years before for $20 million a year, over 4 years. Sometimes you bet on yourself and you lose, but that's a pretty big loss to take. A 1-year super cheap contract when you could have had 4 years, $20 million a year? Something wasn't right. Then the next 2 years after this, Joe signed 1-year deals and they were never more than $3 million. Now this was very strange. Certainly someone would have offered Joe more money over a longer deal. Well, here's why he was signing those 1-year really bad deals. The Timberwolves were over the salary cap. They couldn't sign Joe to a max deal because they didn't have his bird rights. He had to play with the team for 3 more seasons in order for the Timberwolves to sign them and be able to go over the cap. So the Timberwolves told Joe, hey, be patient. They said, hey, sign these little dinky deals over the next 3 years, and then when we have your bird rights, we'll sign you for an $86 million deal. You cannot do this. This is illegal. This is against the law in the CBA. This also was not a pinky promise or a handshake deal. It was in Joe's contract. Well, then how did this contract get exposed? Joe's agents sued each other and all these documents became public. The league found out about the illegal contract. The Minnesota Timberwolves lost 5 first-round picks from the year 2001 to 2005. This crippled Kevin Garnett's chances of winning any championships with the Minnesota Timberwolves. These are first-round picks, not second-round picks. This is a big punishment. This is like the Rudy Gobert trade, but you don't get Rudy Gobert. Glenn Taylor, the team owner, was suspended until the rest of the year. The Wolves were also fined $3.5 million, which is still the biggest fine in NBA history. Fortunately, they didn't punish Joe, other than nullifying his contract and making him sign somewhere else. And of course, he never got his $86 million. He eventually did get back to the Minnesota Timberwolves a year later, and he signed a $34 million contract over the course of 6 years, which isn't terrible. So those are the ways that players and teams try to cheat in the NBA that we know of. It would be interesting to know what scandals actually went down and never got exposed. I could throw in some fun conspiracy theories that haven't been proven, but you know what? No one likes a gossip. Alright, thanks for being here. Like the video or dislike the video, whatever one you did or didn't like. It really helps me a lot. Leave a comment. I reply to every single comment. Give me a recommendation. I believe this was a recommendation. If I can find the comment, I'll post it right here. I think that's it. Be good to your mothers. Eat a corn dog.